All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here will be looking at the Georgia Bulldogs 2024 preview and prediction. Not much has changed with this coaching staff. Glenn Schumann, Travaris Robinson going to be the defensive coordinators. Mike Bobo, third year back on staff, second year in the role as offensive play caller, and then Kirby Smart, immaculate 94-16 record through 8 seasons, 42-2 over the past 3. Nick, absurd mark there, number 1 ranked recruiting class. Barely missed the CFP. The third straight natty potentially was right there on the table for him. Losing to Alabama in the SEC championship game ended up being the lone difference maker for a team that was great last year. Looking at the offense, obviously they're going to lose Brock Bowers, Ladd McConkey, some very important offensive linemen, rotational running backs as well. But this is still going to be one of the nation's top offenses, and it's led by Carson Beck and 7 other starters that are coming back. Beck, he can really rip it. Love his intermediate velocity, win in rhythm. He is just perfect. Accuracy, the feet, the eyes, all in sync when he is clicking. The UK game, for example, where they hung 50 on the Wildcats, does a great job taking what the defense gives him as well. Never really been forced into off-scheduled playmaking. He's really good with his pocket presence. Always in tune off play action. I think he throws a great anticipation. He can at times be late downfield. The intermediate, the deep accuracy can be a little sporadic. And, blitzes can lead to batted balls or throwing off the back foot. Some minor things he's certainly going to improve on at 6'4", 220. Carson Beck considered the top quarterback in FBS, Nick. I don't know if I'm ready to give him that notion yet, but I thought this was a very good player a season ago. And considering how he struggled early on in the season, he showed great poise. And that Auburn game was a first look at that. And he showed it the rest of the season.
Carson Beck, a phenomenal player at quarterback for Georgia. In the Florida episode, I waxed on and on about how great Graham Mertz's completion percentage at 79% was at 358 attempts. Beck's completion percentage was 72% as well with 417 attempts. So a lot more attempts for Beck and still at that 72% completion percentage. A very accurate quarterback, really solid in the pocket. Nearly 4,000 yards passing, can certainly get above that mark this year. 24 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. Yards per attempt, 9.5 yards per attempt. Really solid quarterback top to bottom. We wondered what Beck was going to do when he stepped in as the starter last year, taking over Stetson Bennett, and he thrived in that role. Looked really good in that game against Auburn, which was his coming out party, and he got comfortable throughout the season. Was really solid top to bottom. Obviously, it helps having a guy like Brock Bowers there to throw to. Loses him this year. It's certainly going to be interesting to see what that looks like. But we got a preview of that last year of Bowers' injury woes throughout the season. I think Beck's a phenomenal athlete top to bottom. I think he is the best quarterback in college football right now, and there's no reason not to say that. He's so talented, great arm. The accuracy is phenomenal, really high football IQ, fantastic field vision. I think the frame is phenomenal. A really, really good quarterback and a great leader. More reps in practice, more hours studying the playbook, another year of SEC experience under his belt. Beck can easily take over. I wouldn't be surprised if he finds himself in the Heisman chase late in the season. Certainly has the potential to do so if Georgia is having the similar seasons that they have over the past 3 to 5 years. If they're dominating every single game, you could find him in the Heisman race, certainly, in my opinion. I think Beck's a phenomenal quarterback and a great leader for this Bulldogs offense.
Now, the running back room, plenty of fall off compared to years past. Roderick Robinson, a top 250 recruit in last year's cycle. Andrew Paul, Branson Robinson have both had major injuries over the last 2 years. Branson, a nice physical power back who should be an asset in this scheme. Nate Paul, a true freshman, was a high-end 4-star with some great speed. Showcases power between the tackles, certainly good on the field. And a lot of people were confused when Trevor Etienne came to Georgia because he said he wanted to be the center showcase in the backfield. Everyone knows that Georgia is notorious for rotating their running backs. And I agreed with them. Then I took a little bit deeper of a look at this room and I realized Trevor Etienne might get a nice 20-plus carries a game, Nick, because of the depth not being as strong as in years past. Etienne, a guy coming over from Florida with great burst and long speed, showcased good vision towards the boundary, does great job navigating traffic, good at following, pulling linemen, then hitting the accelerator, bounces off arm tackles with ease. I think Etienne could certainly be looking at a 1,200-yard season because I think they're going to need him to be a bit of a workhorse. Obviously, he'll never get too exhausted, I don't think. But the rotation isn't as strong, Nick, and I think Etienne's certainly going to blossom in this role, and I think you're certainly going to see an uptick in carries compared to years past.
Etienne, a phenomenal player coming over from rival Florida, a late add in the transfer cycle. Kind of shocking when that happened, a really surprising move. Had some off-the-field issues when he got to Georgia, but those have been sorted out. Etienne going to take over and be that number one back. Yes, Georgia like to rotate. They kind of try and keep the wear and tear down on their backs. Didn't have a 1,000-yard rusher last year. They had 2 guys that were nearly 800 yards rushing each, Edwards at 881, and then Kendall Milton had 790, so they were kind of both getting a ton of different carries there. Roderick Robertson, he had nearly 200 yards and 2 scores for him. Look to see him get some nice carries early on. I do think he will take over ETN, that is, and be the lead back for this offense, but don't be surprised if you see Branson Robinson and Cash Jones be involved as well. I do like this pickup here. I think ETN has the potential to absolutely flourish if the offensive line plays at a high level and gets some good blocks early on.
You look at the rest of the supporting cast for the Bulldogs, and obviously they lose some nice pass catchers, but this is still probably, the best receiving core I'd say, Smart has had in this 10-year. Dominic Levitt returns, a guy who's a quick jab step at the start of his route, allows him to really get open with some nice quick feet. Great at winning inside. I think his speed checks out. Mainly a slot guy, went from 0 drops to 4, so certainly needs to work on getting that focus back, generating more explosive plays as well. Great separator, though. Didn't, have the, production I certainly anticipated when we first arrived. Ra Thomas as well. Physical wide receiver. He wins outside as an X. Great at contested catches. Good focus on his only touchdown grab against Kentucky, using those same qualities. Good job of winning on occasional curl and slant routes. Should evolve into some more big plays as he can win up the seam at 6'2", 200. Colby Young, a massive transfer they added from Miami. Has an impressive explosiveness for his size. As an outside wide receiver, a pure X who's somewhat a physical imposer. I think he's effective on curls as well. This is a nice starting 3 right here. I think Dylan Bell's very versatile, probably the best yak threat on the team. Makes plays with the ball in his hands. Will need to be creative as he isn't the best pure wide receiver. From Vanderbilt, they picked up London Humphreys. Great deep threat, excellent speed. Should be used on screens a good bit. Arian Smith, obviously, when he's on the field, has elite speed, tremendous vertical threat. He's good for a couple of 50-yard receptions a year. Health has certainly, led to him not being able to stay on the field much in his career. And another smaller frame guy, Michael Jackson from USC, is likely going to be the punt returner. Going to be effective in the quick game, as well. I certainly don't think they have one standout elite talent, Nick, and I certainly thought that the production from Thomas and Lovett wasn't even close to what I thought it would be, but these guys are certainly going to be reliable playmakers this year, and in terms of variety, they certainly have that, especially with the portal ads.
A very nice rotational offense here. The by-committee approach at Georgia seems to be the way to go for Kirby Smart and company, and they're going to get that this year with a lot of talented guys. Lovett, 613 yards receiving, 11.4 yards per grab, and 4 scores last year for him. Ra Thomas, 383 yards for him, 16.7 and 1 score. Dylan Bell was really solid for them. Could also get out. He was in the backfield at times, converted him, move him around a little bit. He's a very flexible guy because he did have 2 touchdowns on the ground and 157 yards last year, 355 yards on the ground, 12.2 and 2 scores for him. Oscar DeLepp taking over at tight end, 284 and 3 scores for him. A really solid tight end taking over and being your more traditional tight end. Not going to be like Bowers, who was kind of that big, crazy developed player. You can talk about Benjamin Yorsick in a second. Another great ad at tight end, a guy with veteran experience who's coming over. Colby Young, a good ad for Miami, a guy you can plug in at the X. I like him. Arian Smith at that Z, a really solid player as well. 153 yards receiving for him, 19.1 yards per grab, and 2 scores. So a lot of flexibility, a lot of versatility in this offense. I think they'll be able to scheme up and draw up some solid plays and get some good options here.
Yeah, Delp was a dependable target in Bauer's absence. Has some strong hands, and you alluded to Benjamin Yurosek from Stanford, a guy who I didn't even know still had eligibility. I was very stunned to see this one because I think this is a good player. Has good hands, catches away from his body. Nice contested catch player. Good burst. Route running and blocking certainly need to be improved, and he got lazy at times with his hands. When you're playing for Stanford, though, I can totally see how that happens. 6'4", 242, though. I think Yurosek's going to be a massive addition for this offense. Probably not going to have, more than, 300 or 400 yards, but I think at, times on third downs and in the red zone, he's certainly going to impress. Moving forward to this offensive line, I certainly felt they had some issues at their left and right tackle spot last year. Nothing that really costed this team, obviously, considering they only lost one game by a couple of points. But when you have a team this good, you certainly got to look for things to improve on, considering they didn't reach their goal of another national championship. And I think Ernest Green at left tackle, versatile, powerful run blocker, nice fluid athlete, can move up the field well, makes good blocks at the second level. I think he's a bit of a mean blocker. Speed rushers could get around the edge on him, though. Really struggles to slide his feet to wider depth rushers. Only sack allowed was a pure bull rush from Dallas Turner. No blemish there, right? Played with, he was a player who struggled with consistency, though. I thought needs to set lower base and run blocking the match with his power at 6'4", 320, and then Xavier Truss at right tackle. He played right guards. When Amarius Mims came back versus Georgia Tech, he struggled badly, can be off balance moving laterally due to lack of quickness, seems to play off balance a bit in general, hand placement, and badly timed punches. Does have good power with some heavy hands, though. Are you worried about these tackle spots, Nick? Because right now, tackle depth is certainly a bit iffy, and these two guys need to rise up this year, which I think they certainly will, but to what level?
I am concerned a little bit about this, and I think Truss definitely has some concerns at right tackle. I really do think he has a lot of room to grow. I think Ernest Green as well. A young guy as redshirt sophomore, does not have a ton of snaps at left tackle. That's a tough position, right? That's your key position there on the offensive line. These tackles, I am worried about both of them. I think the hands on both of them need a lot of work. Obviously, that's stuff you can work on in the offseason, but these tackle positions in the past couple of seasons have been really solid for Georgia. They've pumped out a lot of guys to the NFL. Need to continue to step up and replace. The defense has had no issue replacing the talent. Offensive line has been good so far replacing talent, but I think this is one year where I'm a little concerned preseason. I think Green really does worry me at left tackle.
Now you look at the interior, I don't think there's any questions here, even though at center, Cedric Van Pran's departure is going to be tough. Jared Wilson, a guy who's been in the program for 3-4 years already. Certainly you want to monitor how he can pick up blitzes and communicate. Should be all right in this role, though, being, again, 4 years in the program. Should be interesting to see the approach if he goes down or struggles, though. I think at guard they're fine. Tate Ratledge doesn't have elite physical traits or overwhelming power. He plays with good knee bend and pad level, great leg drive, great at sealing off defenders, been a great anchor while being a strong finisher in the run game. Their left guard spot much of the year was rotated between Dylan Fairchild at 6'5", 315, and, one of my former high school classmates, Micah Morris, 6'6", 330. They're both outstanding. Not much pressure was allowed at that spot. And again, the center spot's more of a mystery, Nick, but I think they have 3 guards right here. They could start on any team in the country. Wilson, his experience, in the program is going to bout him very well. No issues for me on the interior.
I think the interior is just fine right now. I was worried about the tackles and the outside starting, but I think this interior is really solid. Good group of veteran leaders for this SEC program that have really developed well. I think Dylan Fairchild's solid at left guard, but Micah Morris right there behind you at left guard could really work out as well. I think you could rotate both of them as well. They have some nice depth as true freshmen coming in, highly rated recruits as well. As we know, that's a top class that Georgia got this year. Tate Ratledge is a really solid player at right guard. He developed really well. A good leader overall. Kelton Smith Jr. as well as redshirt freshman right guard. You could plug him in potentially if you need to. Jared Wilson, he's going to step up. He's been in the program for a couple of years, so I'm not as concerned. He does got a few reps here and there under his belt. Drew Bobo at center as well, potentially a redshirt sophomore, not as much experience. And then Malachi Tolivar, a guy out of high school, a really highly rated recruit that could potentially plug in at center if necessary as well. I think this interior is very solid. Georgia's been really good at developing the trench. They continue to produce guys in the NFL, so I have no doubt these guys will develop throughout the season and be really strong, protecting Beck and giving him that time to complete those passes.
The offensive verdict, as good as it comes with a pro-ready quarterback, could really rip it. Etienne will carry a bigger load than we are accustomed to seeing for Georgia running backs, as depth isn't all that great, but the pass-catching group is tremendous. Balance will one against overwhelm opponents. Ceiling really depends on the progress of both of those tackles. I think at the end of the day, though, physicality will reign supreme, regardless of what they put in there. That's the one thing they coached better than anybody, is that physicality. Pass rushing teams with some prowess, though, might be able to keep them in check off the edge. A-plus offense for me. Looking at the defensive side of the ball, a unit that certainly took some steps back in terms of, ability to defend the run. Nothing that was too crazy. They lost 10 guys in the portal, Xavier Sori, and then a starter in Jamon Dumas-Johnson. Marvin Jones, of course, moves on. They did add only 2 players, though. They returned 6 starters. 2 of the top 3 tacklers depart. Top 3 defensive backs are gone. This is a team that runs a lot of cover 2 and cover 4. Allowed 19 more runs of 10-plus yards than they did in 2022. So we're going to talk about that step back a little bit. Nazir Stackhouse, Warren Brinson, they're returning. Nazir has a gas tank that leads to poor effort at times. Good shoulder lane to slice through gaps, though. Upends offensive lineman at the point of attack. Nice contact in the hole at 6'3", 320. Brinson, on the other hand, has good burst. Like how he gets uphill. It was a pretty good pass rusher for them. It was a pretty solid swim move. Greatly improved as a run defender in his own right. Michael Williams didn't play as good as I thought he would be. I thought he'd be in contention for Conference Player of the Year, a guy who showcased good speed to power, nice bull rusher, stands up opposing offensive linemen, can really walk them down. Relentless effort, uses his hands very well, good first step, good length. This is a player that just did not produce last season, Nick, and I certainly think the potential is there for him to do so, but only 4.5 sacks across 13 games, along with only 18 tackles, was just not something I expected from a player of that caliber. Not much turnover up front, though. 5-star Jordan Hall enters his second year. You already know that means he's going to be great for them with heavy hands and good explosion. The body control and leg drive checks out. 350-pounder Jamal Jarrett, top 100 recruit last year, excels with burst off the snap. Perfect nose for Georgia with his power and strength. Christian Miller from his defensive end spot. Started to see more time last year. good speed. I like his high motor as a 1 or 3 tech. Tyrion Ingram Dawkins, an X5 star in the class of 21, is yet to really emerge. Has great length for a 280-pounder. The only transfer they picked up here was Xavier McCord from South Carolina, a guy who's shown the ability to collapse the pocket, kind of considered a disruptor. The offensive line, they don't have an elite standout, but this is a great group of players here, one of the nation's best. And I think that's one reason why they probably struggled last year, Nick. It happened only really early in games where they would, look a little lackluster against the run. Against the Missouri Tigers, it was more of a 4-quarter game where the run defense didn't look all that great. As games went on, though, they were great. Early on, though, it wasn't so much. But what can we do here to make sure it doesn't become a problem for 4 quarters?
This defense struggled last year and was uncharacteristic for a Kirby Smart defense. They struggled against the run, which is really weird. They were still very solid, right, 20th in the nation, but they did look weird at times. I think, the game I picture perfectly in my head is the game against Tennessee, right? First play of the game, bang, the Tennessee rushes off a massive touchdown to open the game, a really huge gain to set the tone. But then Georgia's defense got better throughout the game, and Tennessee had no life at the end of that game. That was really just a really weird early moment. Alabama looked good on the ground as well in the SEC title game against this run defense. So certainly uncharacteristic. Nazir Stackhouse, he struggles to stay on the field for three straight downs. He gets tired very quickly, runs out of gas easily. When he is playing, though, really incredible player. Clogs that gap. 24 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, plus a pick for him. Really solid player. Warren Brinson, I like what he can do. Disappointed a little bit of him. I really thought I'd see more out of him. 21 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 2 sacks for Brinson. Mikael Williams, again, I thought I had high expectations just like you did. Didn't quite get there. 18 total tackles is very disappointing. 6.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks is a good number for him. I think that's certainly putting him on the right track to getting those higher numbers. Some other players, Tyrone Ingram Dawkins, he's got to step up this year. 8 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, and a sack in limited appearance. He also forced a fumble. What can he do? Is he going to be able to be involved in this team and really dominate at certain point? Kristen Miller is another solid player. 14 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, plus a sack for him. What's he going to look like this year? What's his usage going to be on that edge? Can you get a lot of pressure out of him? There are some question marks on this defense, but they are still Georgia. It still is Kirby Smart coaching his team, where he has his next man up mentality, returning a lot of guys like this. That certainly bodes well if you're a Dogs fan.
And they allowed 200-plus yards twice last year, and it's not like they were garbage-time numbers. Those against Auburn and Georgia Tech on the road, both being one-score games. So, that's something that was certainly a bit of a red flag. Against Bama, they really cracked down well, though, so it was never a major concern. But I think a few more big plays from the Yellow Jackets or the Tigers, and the games could have been completely different. Remember, I think it was in the first half of that game, Auburn, they're in the red zone. They got stuffed on 4th and short against the run. So, obviously, they still stepped up and made big plays to really, afforded them victories in those contests. I think a big reason why they kind of struggled is maybe this linebacking core. They do return Smale Munden, a guy who gets downfield in a hurry. He's been a great tackler, athletic in coverage with some length, physical when getting off blocks. Is a thinner frame guy, hasn't been a big playmaker, but he's been good versus the run, not great. He does have a quick trigger, but it often causes him to be out of plays. CJ Allen, full-time starter now, struggled versus some misdirection. One noise, keep a strong base and dictating where to go. Was a great tackler, athletic player who has ball skills, admirable in coverage. Did struggle a good bit versus the run, but he's only going to be better. Obviously, he was kind of forced into action when Dumas Johnson got hurt. No issues of Allen one bit. I'm a big fan of Jalen Walker, though. Great speed and suddenness off the edge. Versatility. He's going to be a backup on the interior. Needs to be used more as a pass rusher, though, Nick. I know I've alluded to at times, though, Georgia doesn't have great prowess off the edge, even though they find a way to get their sacks in key moments. And I think Walker could be a good time piece for them off the edge. Damon Wilson was a high-prized edge in last year's class, spent more time as well at inside linebacker. Great young group of versatility. And, speaking of a true defensive end, Chaz Chambliss was heavily improved. Not much of a game changer, rendered ineffective versus bigger tackles, but was good edge setter versus the run this past season, which I didn't expect. This is a linebacking core of a lot of upside here.
Some solid returning production in the middle of this defense. Smell Bundon, the second leading tackler on the team, your top returning tackler with 68 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks for him. Good leader, that quarterback of the defense. I really do like what he can do. I think he's a player that's got good veteran leadership at this point in time. A solid player top to bottom. CJ Allen, I think he's a really exciting player. Right, he's a true freshman last year. Got good snaps, good appearances, 41 total tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, 1 sack for him. A good guy to have there. Jalen Walker, 20 total tackles, 5.5 tackles for loss, 5 sacks. Really nice returning production in terms of tackles for loss and sacks there. Really solid numbers. Your top returning sack getter, a guy that could really have some nice flexibility and move him around. Jordan Hall, I like him as well. A guy that could be potentially moved into various different positions. A guy that's got some good experience early on in his career at this university, solid player top to bottom. Chaz Chambliss as well is a guy that's a good player, 3 tackles for loss, 20 total tackles for him, 2 pass breakups, gets his hand up on the line occasionally. I think this middle part of the defense is going to get better as the season goes on. They have returning enough guys, in my opinion, to kind of build that stability up. They need to rotate a little bit. It's a very strong unit. They have good depth as well. They missed a couple tackles late in the season last year. They had some issues. Can they sort that out? I think they can with the coaching they have.
You look at a secondary, unit that only twice gave up over 60% completion rating. Actually, I think the number is a little higher than that, about 3 times, I think. Obviously, 55% for the year in terms of opponent completion rating was never a big struggle for them. They do lose some key components, though. Obviously, in the back end, guys like Javon Bullard, Tyke Smith, Kamari Lassiter. And you certainly wonder how this cornerback duo will do. Dalen Everett certainly struggled down the stretch. He was a willing run stopper. Has been a good tackler. Did get beat versus Luther Burden, deep for a touchdown. Seems to mirror well in shallower routes or on quicker throws. Pinned some slower wide receivers to the boundary. Julian Humphrey and Everett both seemed like guys the opponents wanted to pick on. Humphrey was going to transfer, decided not to. A player of elite speed, good instincts in zone. Daniel Harris, an ex-4-star, played a ton in the Orange Bowl. Number 2 overall ranked recruit and true freshman Ellis Robinson. He's in a battle for a backup spot. Great speed and length from him. Chris Pearl, a redshirt freshman, a player with some good technique. So you have a lot of young guys in this secondary. Deion Jackson, when you look at safety, he's going to be penciled in as a starter. Has always been a quality player. Doesn't produce much in coverage, though. Typically isn't trusted much in the back end. Did improve as a run stopper, though. 5-star KJ Bolden, great range and instincts, an asset at all 3 levels. And then true sophomore 5-star Janelle Aguero, 5'11", 205. Play style of a safety, athleticism as a corner. Should be the slot hybrid here. And, of course, Malachi Starks, the top safety in America, acrobatic athlete, great run stopper, improved in coverage significantly after frequent busts in year 1. A great tackler, improving on angles. Gets downhill in a hurry. I love his versatility. They line him up all over, especially in the box. Great ball skills. I think he's the best in FBS, Nick, and that's certainly going to help with a relatively young unit.
Secondary certainly starts with Malachi Starks, 52 total tackles last year, 3 picks, 7 pass breakups. Such a great athlete, very versatile, good leader for this secondary unit. Dylan Everett, I think he's a good player, right? I think there is, if you polish off some of those mistakes, he could be a star player for this defense. 29 total tackles, 5 pass breakups, and a pick for him. Certainly some room to grow in coverage at times and needs to work on his tackling, but a good player top to bottom. Julian Humphrey, he stays in Athens despite potentially leaving after a rough season, getting picked on at times. 11 total tackles from 1 pass breakup in parts of 9 games. Want to see more out of him this year. He's a good player on that left side. I think he has a lot of potential, but he's not lived up to that potential yet. Some other different players plugging in inside and out, rotating players. Got a great recruit. Daniel Harris looked good in the Orange Bowl. Want to see what he can do this year. I think the secondary unit is solid, and I think they're going to be a typical Georgia secondary. This defense was good last year against the pass, right? 9th in the nation. They want to kind of be at that same similar yards per game mark in terms of pass yards, getting at 175. I think they have the personnel to do that.
Obviously that slot corner blitz is a bit of a staple, and they need pass rush. So if Aguero is going to be the full-time hybrid, certainly going to be interested to see how he thrives when they call his number in those situations. Verdict on the defense, they're once again going to be elite and should be even stronger against the run. Unit has plenty of youth, but veterans in all 3 phases. They'll be instrumental in coaching up those young 4 and 5 stars. Really excited the edge this D-line plays with after, somewhat a disappointing season. Secondary is the most inexperienced unit, and outside corner should be susceptible to potentially allowing some, big plays. Certainly want to see Michael Williams emerge as one of the nation's better pass rushers. And again, Jalen Walker, these guys should have a big increase in production. Leads us to the prediction. The Dogs fell victim to the 4-playoff system and let out a bit of anger in the bowl game. They should continue to be the theme coming into 2024. Not much has changed. Still very deep, very physical. If teams want to expose them, though, it's going to come from the tackles not progressing as expected and potential the youth at cornerback causing them issues. Tough schedule, but built to manage it better than anyone else. I think the lone blemish here is going to be on the road. Nick Saban's still going to be involved in that game plan, Nick, on defense, and I think that's going to cause some issues in Tuscaloosa. Other than that, though, relatively simple schedule. Maybe a scare week 1 against Clemson. At Kentucky is interesting overall. This is a pretty easy route for them with a lot of nice home games, even though on the road at Ole Miss and Texas could cause them issues. I see them getting the job done.
I think this is going to be a pretty simply straightforward 11-1 here. I do like Alabama to win. Now, I know that is my alma mater. I think it's going to be a close game, but Alabama in the Nick Saban era had Georgia's number and Kirby Smart's number, other than that one loss in the national title game, which obviously was a tough loss as Georgia won a national championship. Without Nick Saban, I still think Kalen DeBoer and his company will be able to get the job done against Georgia at home. That crowd is going to be absolutely rocking at Bryant-Denny Stadium. Kentucky last year, people thought Kentucky might catch Georgia off guard in Athens. That was not the case as they blew out the Wildcats. Up there in Lexington, you have a tougher case, but I think earlier in the season actually benefits Georgia. I think if you got Kentucky later in the season, you might be able to make a tougher case for that being a closer game. I do think Georgia will win that game. I think they will. I think Clemson will keep it close, right? I think the line right now is 13.5, 12.5, depending on your book. I think Clemson will cover that, but I do think Georgia will win the game outright. Very fascinating to see how that continues to develop over the summer. Obviously, we'll have a closer prediction to that when we get closer to the game in the end of August. That is actually Auburn at home. I think they'll be able to take care of the Tigers very easily at home. On the road could be always a tough situation. They get lucky they don't have to play the Tigers on the road this year. At Texas, at Ole Miss, those are two games you certainly got to circle, right? What is Texas going to look like in year one in the SEC? I'm not as high on them as some people. I think Georgia will be able to win that game pretty comfortably. And then Ole Miss, that's the absolute true wild card. Another team that I'm not as high on as other people, but it's still a very talented team that Kiffin has put together through the portal. They're going to be rocking at Oxford. That could be, a game day game written all over. It could be one of the biggest games in Ole Miss history. They're going to have a lot of energy. If they win that game, that will certainly be a Kickstarter for that program. I think Georgia will be just fine. They'll find their way into the 12-team playoff with no issues at all and won't have to beat down on a lowly, beat up, missing their entire roster, Florida State, in the Orange Bowl this year, because they will get a shot in the expanded Big Dance and they'll have an opportunity to go play for a national championship this year.
I think you used the word simple a second ago when discussing their schedule. That is inaccurate if I use that word, because this is a tough schedule, especially on the road. In Week 3, Brock Vandagriff, former quarterback at Kentucky, a team that's going to be pretty good this year. There's a lot of opportunities for them to lose, so 11-1 on this schedule shows incredibly how good they are. I don't see them losing more than 2 games all year long. It's possible they get upset on the road in one of these ones, but 12-0 is probably going to be the ceiling here. Wouldn't be shocked one bit if they just ran through everybody. This is a great team this year. As always, Nick, I appreciate you joining me. This team will be in the SEC championship game.
Looking forward to seeing what this team does. Obviously, they return a lot of talent on offense, return a lot of talent on defense. Kirby Smart, an incredible coach. Will they be able to get back to winning the SEC title and another national championship? Those fans want another national championship. If they can make it 3 and 4 years, that'd be a pretty impressive run.
Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.